Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the London Ballet Circle's first live/Zoom in conversation, and we're very excited to welcome a large group of people here in the Royal Ballet School and also on Zoom. We are being watched from Canada, the United States, all over Europe and the UK. And I'd like to say a very special warm welcome to the members of the British Spanish Society who are with us tonight too, also live and on Zoom. It's a real thrill to be here and to have our first hybrid event with the amazing Tamara Rojo as our guest. We've all been looking forward to tonight immensely. We're sorry to see her go, but she has left us such an amazing legacy of incredible performances, which finished on Friday night in Paris with Akram Khan's Giselle. I was privileged to be there to see it. And I'm not sure if I cried harder for the final duet or the fact that it was the last time I was going to see her dance, but it was phenomenal. And not only has she left us a legacy of incredible performances over the years, but also this amazing new English National Ballet headquarters out in the East End of London. JMU's held a lot of memories for all of us, but it was past its sell-by date. And thanks to our amazing Tamara Rojo, we have an incredible new facility. So I'm delighted tonight to welcome Tamara and Graham Watts, who will lead the conversation. Those of you in the audience, there will be a chance to ask questions. Those of you who are watching on Zoom, if you do have a question, please type it into the chat box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll monitor those. If the questions are all sort of the same, we'll kind of amalgamate them in that, but we'll do our best to get to them. So that's it from me. Please now a warm welcome for Tamara Rojo and Graham Watts.
Thank you very much, Susan. It's great to, I think you call them a hybrid event nowadays, don't you, where you have some people on Zoom and some people in the audience, but it's great to welcome you wherever you are in the world and here in the Royal Ballet School to this event. I don't know how we're going to do justice to Tamara's incredible career in just an hour or so, but what I want to do in this conversation is just touch upon some of the many facets that make up this amazing woman, if she doesn't mind me saying so. Dancer, of course, artistic leader, of course, choreographer recently, mother, of course, but also academic. Not many people know so much about that, I think, and also engineer. We're going to touch on that too, if we get time. So let's start off with last Friday, because like Susan, I was also in the audience at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées on Friday evening. I know there's one or two other people in the audience who were also there, and it was an incredible evening. I don't know if many of you are on Facebook, but my Facebook is a public page. If you want to go and look up my Facebook, I've got the video of the curtain call, which in itself was a pretty emotional even. Do go and see it. It would have been nice if we could have shown it here, but the facilities wouldn't allow that. So Tamara, final performance, really final performance?
Really. Yes. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Yeah, I mean, it's been delayed by the pandemic, by motherhood, by all kinds of things, but I've been ready to say farewell to the stage for a long time. I've been immensely lucky with my career. I don't think I had a particularly gifted body, and yet it's lasted. So I'm just really grateful to how much I've been able to experience on the stage. And yeah, I really couldn't get myself through it anymore. That's the truth. The work that it takes to get on the stage at my age is a full-time job. And I have another job and I have a little child. And it was I just couldn't get the motivation anymore. So I wanted to do it with dignity when I feel I could do honor to the choreography and the performance and to the company. And I would have loved to do it here in the UK, in all honesty, because I feel this is my audience. They have supported me for 25 years, but it was impossible. And so Paris seemed like a good second best.
Well, you had a sort of little farewell tour in a sense, didn't you? Because you also said goodbye in Barcelona. You went to America, to Mexico. So it's been a kind of slightly worldwide farewell.
Somehow it worked out. Like I said, all of it was supposed to happen before the pandemic, and all of it got delayed by 3 years. Really?
Well, I suppose we can say it's one silver lining of the pandemic, as we got those extra few years, and it must have been particularly special because you were able to perform Akram's Giselle with your partner Isaac. That was pretty amazing, I think.
It was. Originally, Akram split us. We started the creation process together, and Alina was with James. And then Akram said, no, this is too much. So he split us, and I ended up performing with James Streeter, which I adore. And Alina and Isaac used to perform together. But for this last time, I mean, after that, for different, like it happens, injuries and changes, and we've all danced with everybody. But it was quite emotional to be able to say farewell with him on the stage.
Yeah. And although Alina danced the premiere in Manchester, which I was also privileged to be at, I think a lot of people don't realize that many of the steps you made personally with Akram in the studio before it was broadened out to the rest of the company. So I do see it in a sense as your ballet, the ballet that was made on you.
I think it's fair to say it's a combination of both of our characters and both of our ways of work, Alina and I. I started the process in autumn, actually in the autumn, a year before the premiere. And it was just me and Akram in a studio in South Wales. And we did workshops of movements. He was working on Until the Lions. So he showed me some of the solos of the females of Until the Lions. And then we kind of did variations on that. And then he asked me, because he had never seen Giselle. So he asked me to interpret every character in the ballet. So he filmed me a number of times while I did the whole ballet as Giselle, the whole ballet as Albrecht, the whole ballet as Bathilde, the whole ballet. So I talked what every gesture meant so he could film and understand, because he said he was watching it, but he couldn't understand it. So I did every character. And I have to say, I was so grateful that my very first ballet was Giselle as a 19-year-old girl. And we had Cuban teachers who came to teach it to us. And the passion that Cubans have for Giselle is immeasurable. The knowledge, the investigation they've given, there are whole academic studies about the meaning of everything in Cuba. And so in a way, it was strange because suddenly things that were very interesting when I was 19, but I never thought I will use again, other than for my own benefit as a dancer. It all made sense that I was now able to tell Akram why Bathilde did what she did, or why every gesture and all the different stories that the Cubans have about the possibility that Giselle might actually be half sister of Albrecht, and that's why they recognize in each other, and all those things. And it was just actually really interesting. But going back to the process, eventually when the whole company got involved and Alina got involved, I think what she brought to Act 2, I could never bring myself. I'm a very grounded and kind of a strong and physical performer, and she is a very spiritual performer. And I think we all brought the best of each other to the production.
Well, what I can say, having been in the audience on Friday, is that your farewell performance was right at the very top, because it was, as Susan said, a remarkable performance. I mean, I think it was Sylvie Guillem, wasn't it, who said she confided to a very close friend that they should tell her when was the time to stop. But you obviously didn't need to do that. And I think you probably could go on for a few more years yet. But
I think people don't tell you. Like I've confided to my close friends to tell me to stop. And then I watched videos of myself and I thought they should have told me to stop. So I think people that love you just can't do that. And I can't do it to anybody. So yeah, it's a difficult thing. It's a personal thing, and you have to hopefully make that decision yourself.
Let's go back to the beginning, because not many people, I think, would know that you were born in Canada, because everybody sees you as being Spanish, of course. And actually, I found out on Friday from your dad that you still have Canadian citizenship. I didn't know that either. It could be helpful, I guess.
Very helpful right now with visas for United States of America. It's been suddenly very helpful.
But you were only in Canada for a very few months, I think, because your dad was working there, yeah?
Yes, less than a year. Both my mom and dad have been living there for 11 years. My dad had to escape Spain because of political reasons. And my mom went to Canada to study, and then she stayed, and they met there, they married there, and I was born there.
Mm-hmm. And then you came back to Spain with them?
Yes.
Neither of them were dancers, had anything to do with dance. Your dad is an engineer. Your mom is a force of nature, I think. How did you get to want to be a dancer? How did that happen?
So my mom, like you say, was one of the directives of Burger King in Spain. Obviously worked very hard, and she used to come and pick me up at the end of the school day, and often was late because of work. And often I was just waiting at the playground by myself. And one of those days it was raining, and a teacher that I had never met before came to me, one of the most beautiful women I have ever met, and she smelled like heaven. And she said to me, "Why don't you come into the gym? We're doing ballet and it will be warm there." And all I heard was ballet warm. And I was like, yeah, I'm coming in. I didn't know what ballet was, of course. And then I came in, and it was like something happened. Like I found my place in the world. And I just fell in love instantly with ballet. And I didn't know ballet was a performance. I thought ballet was ballet class. And so my mom came to pick me up, and I insisted that I must do ballet. And my parents were a bit against it for quite some months. And eventually I persuaded them. And then one day my mom took me to see the Bolshoi to Swan Lake, because I had never seen a ballet. And I kept saying to everybody I was going to be a ballerina. And I was so disappointed, because I thought being a ballerina was doing ballet class until you became the ballet teacher. That's what being a ballerina was. And I suddenly realized that you had to perform to people. And that was not in my plans. So I had a midlife crisis at 6. But then I loved ballet class so much that I went, well, I'll just keep doing it, and then I'll make the decision later.
Well, of course, many people do ballet class and then become the teacher and not necessarily perform. But so it sounds as if it was like somebody switched on a switch, and you just wanted to be a ballet dancer. Yeah. But talking about your mum and dad, they also insisted that, as well as doing ballet classes as you got older, that you carried on your academic studies, didn't they?
Yes, very much so, especially my mom, because she always wanted to go to university and she couldn't, because she was female. So my granddad decided that money for university should be spent on men, on his male children, even though my mom was the smart one. So she always had that frustration. And so for her, it was very important that I should study. And also because in Spain, there was no clear path towards being a professional dancer. Victor Yate was named the first director of the national company when I was probably about 9-10 years old. Mm-hmm. But then he was fired within 3 years. He then opened his own school. But there was no clear future, professional future. So most parents felt that it was a nice hobby, but in all seriousness, at the end, you're going to have to find a job, and it's not going to be ballet in Spain. Mm-hmm. So they wanted me to have a proper career.
But I think actually it's a good model, because to go obsessively into ballet alone when it has an uncertain future for so many, I think is a mistake. And it does seem to me that the one thing we would all agree about your career is this incredible inquiring mind that you have. And I know that has been expansive. You know, you're fascinated by literature, by film, by theatre, and I'm sure that must come about really because of that, those early influences that you had, which not just in the ballet class, but also in other classes.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm very curious and I get bored very quickly. So I constantly need stimulation. And I think that's partially also my parents. They were very politically motivated. They were part of kind of the resistance against Franco and the transition movement in Spain. And in that case, it was more my father's influence. He always looked at ballet slightly sniggering, like he always thought this is kind of silly, and he will question everything. And on the other hand, it was kind of difficult for me as a young girl and a teenager, because on the other hand, the school I was part of, Victor Yete, was a little bit like a religion. Not a little bit, it was like a religion. You could not question anything. It was what Victor said, however many hours, however he said it. It was just one way to pursue your dream. Mm-hmm. And then I will go home and my dad will question everything and drive me completely crazy. But then what happened is that they did things like we used to have summer school in Victor. And if you didn't do the summer school, you kind of went punished in the autumn. But my parents made me go to summer school elsewhere every year so that I will find out that maybe there wasn't only one way of doing ballet, and maybe there wasn't only one way of looking at it or talking about it or performing it or looking in it. And yeah, that carried throughout whenever I was anywhere, in any institution, in any company, and I was confronted by a statement, this is how it is, or this is how we've always done it, or you should do it this way. There was always this thing at the back of my mind that went, but why? Mm-hmm. And yes, I guess that has been part of how I.
So at what point did the interest in performing on the stage, because you mentioned when you found out that's what it led to, you were a bit nervous. So yeah. At what point did that change?
It kind of didn't for a very long time. It was almost like the compromise I had to do in order to do what I wanted, which was to be in the studio. So even at the beginning of the career as a performer, the stage was not where I was happiest. It was the studio, it was the class, and it was the rehearsals. It was the work that I loved rather than the exposure.
Mm-hmm. But you did quite quickly and quite early make the grade into a professional company working with Victor.
Yeah.
So you didn't get punished too much for missing the summer classes.
We were a small school. There were only so many options, eventually.
And as you said, your first major role at 19 was Giselle, and actually you posted a lovely photo of it recently. Yeah. Do you have what memories do you have of that?
It was amazing. I mean, like I said, it was a very small company, so you were on every night. And so I was a Willy one night, I was Peasant Pas de Deux another night, and I was Giselle a different night. But again, that's how I felt I learned my profession, by dancing 12 shows a week, both in Victor, but also here in EMB in my first 3 years, just dancing to the point where your brain doesn't interfere. And that level of freedom, that's where I fell in love with the stage. Is when I achieved that level of freedom of the stage that I felt I was, free as a human being. I could do whatever I wanted. There was no fear at all. And there was only enjoyment.
And then a big thing in your life was going to the Paris competition. Yeah. Did you do other competitions, by the way, at the time?
I did one more when I was much younger. I think I was 12, 14 in Valencia. It was a very small competition. And funnily enough, there was somebody, I don't know who, from the Royal Ballet School who told my parents that I should join the Royal Ballet School because I won that competition as well. But at the time, my mother wasn't willing to let me go to England by myself. So I stayed in Spain.
Yeah, but tell me about Paris, because you went to Paris and there were some famous people in the jury, including
Yes.
Galina Samsova.
Natalia Makarova,
Mhm.
Galina Samsova, Vasiliev. Yes, there
Three
was
big names.
big names that I didn't know any of them. I really had no culture of ballet, and that was something that, again, I think that has also shaped a lot of what I do, and my feeling of being an outsider and questioning things is that we didn't know anything about ballet in Spain, very little. Victor's career came from Bejar, and it was very focused on Bejar. And so we knew Bolshoi, we knew Sylvie Guillem, Paris Opera, and Nureyev. We knew Margot Fontaine, Royal Ballet, but that was kind of it. So although I did have seen the programs on television with Natalia Makarova, in my head, I didn't realize really the importance of the people. And certainly I had no idea who Lano Samsova was.
It's probably not a bad thing. That
No,
you
it was
didn't-
good. It was good. It was good.
But it did lead to a job offer.
Yes, Galina offered me a job as a principal dancer, actually, which was outrageous to me, in a Scottish Ballet. Because again, I had never danced ballet. I've only done Giselle.
Mm.
The rest had been choreographies of Hans van Manen or Rudy van Dancing or Victor Ullate. And so I arrived to Scotland, and I did from December to May, I learned Nutcracker, Swan Lake, La Sylphide Bournonville, and Cranko's Romeo and Juliet.
Mm. Big uprooting to go from Madrid to Scotland. How were your parents about that?
They were fine. My parents have been migrants all their life.
Mm.
They actually had left Spain before I left. They were already living in France for work. That was never like also when you decided you were going to be a ballet dancer in Spain, you knew you had to leave at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of the opportunity. I was very happy in Glasgow. I absolutely loved Glasgow. The only thing is that it rained every day. Every day.
Well, anyway, so you were only there for a year, maybe that's what.
Less than that, yes. December to June, and then Derek came.
And then Derek came for you, did he?
Yes, he came to see a Romeo and Juliet in Glasgow, Granco's Romeo and Juliet. And he was planning to do his Romeo and Juliet in the round. And he was looking for a Juliet. And so he offered me a position in EMB.
So you came down to J Muse, the
Yes.
first iteration of Tamara in EMB. And you were there for a few years.
3 years.
3 years, yeah. And then Royal Ballet.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Monica Mason. She came to set Rite of Spring, Kenneth Macmillan Rite of Spring.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, by then I had seen everything, because also the Royal Ballet had left the Royal Opera House. So they were performing at Hammersmith Apollo, which was a bus ride from EMB. So I will finish at 6:30, jump on the bus, get to the Apollo, buy whatever ticket was left. I think it was £16 at the time. And I saw everybody. I saw, Mohamedov. I saw Johnny Cope, Carlos Acosta. I saw Sylvie. I saw Viviana. I saw everybody and everything they did. And so Dame Monica Mason came to teach us The Rite of Spring by Kenneth Macmillan. And by then, Derek is I think he's a fantastic man, but he's not an easy man. And I had come from a very difficult school into a very difficult company in Madrid. Then I had a wonderful time in Scotland, and then I had gone to EMB, and it was becoming very difficult again. Mm. And I just decided also that the thing I wanted to do more than anything was dance Kenneth repertoire. Mm. And so I contacted Anthony Dowell, and he offered me a job.
A principal job.
Yes.
And 12 years of wonderful performances, which we've all seen. What are the abiding memories that you took away from the Royal Ballet? Because
there's so many. I mean, obviously dancing with Carlos, that partnership was exhilarating and being part of a partnership that is very trusting. Like we could really trust each other on the stage and in the studio. Also that it felt like it created something special. It was more than the sum of its parts. It always felt like Carlos was great, I was great, but together there was something more.
Extra. Yeah.
And so being part of that was great. Dancing with Jonathan Cope, Song of the Earth, I will never forget that. I think for me, that was the most transformative experience in a way. Mayerlin too, Johnny Cope with Mayerlin.
I guess dancing with Carlos and Romeo and Juliet in the O2 with 18,000 people.
Yeah, that was a ball. That was interesting. I'm not sure. Yeah, but the interesting thing is I had danced already in the round with EMB. So I was used to big arenas, but this felt somewhat distant in a way. I'm not sure that I felt that it worked as well, the O2, as the Albert Hall did. I don't think it did.
Well, I remember I was in the audience a few times, especially for you and Carlos. And the thing I remember is people getting up and going get pints of beer when you're just about to do the balcony part of the. It was a strange experience. But that period of time, there was a big push to do these arena shows, wasn't there? Not so popular now, but.
I think there was a real effort by the management to find ways of getting bigger audiences, different audiences. It's the usual thing we're all working towards, is opening the art form and being less maybe reverent, but where is the limit between reverence and just complete detachment? So I think that maybe went a bit too far.
I think that point about popularizing the art form is a really nice segue into your role in artistic leadership. And of course, in 2012, you took over as the artistic director at EMB, where you've been for 10 years. And I think there are many things that characterize those 10 years, but I think trying to push the envelope and get more people into enjoying and loving ballet is something you've really worked very hard at. Do you want to just unpack that a little bit for us?
I guess it's because I genuinely believe in the potential of ballet and all art forms, but obviously ballet is what I do, to change people's lives for the better. And I know we say it, and I know sometimes it's difficult to measure, but it has changed my life for the better. But obviously, I also think that it can change audiences' life. And I was immensely lucky that the second chairman I had, but the chairman I had for the longest was Justin Bickle, who was a man that came from working class. He was a self-made man, and somebody that when you first met, you would never think that ballet was the thing that touched him, but ballet was the thing that touched him, and that change completely transformed his life from being a life dedicated to the pursuit of financial gain to being a life dedicated to others. And I guess because I met him as well, just at the beginning of the journey, and because I always felt that I was an outsider of the art form. I didn't come from the Paris Opera Ballet School, from the Boischer, for the Vaganova. I had no pedigree. I kind of could do this. I could be irreverent to my own art form, and I could try and stretch the limits, and I could try and talk about things that perhaps people that felt they had a tradition to uphold and something to carry forward, that was a big weight on their shoulders. Perhaps they didn't feel like that. In a way, I was lighter. And I remember as a dancer, I always felt it was a disadvantage that I didn't come from those schools, that I had to always prove myself every day physically with my sweat. Whenever I was invited by any ballet company, I had to do the best class, and I had to show everybody why I was invited, because I was nobody from nowhere. And then suddenly that was an advantage when I became an artistic director.
It's just reflecting on Justin. I mean, if you don't know, that sadly he died earlier this year, tragically young age. But he's the only chair of a ballet company that I can remember that actually has come to introduce himself to critics like me to say, you know, I'm Justin Bickel, I'm the chair of ENB. He was very personable. And it seems to me that that triumvirate of the chair, the chief executive, and the artistic director, that is the secret of how to run a successful ballet company. And I think it's worked very well in the 10 years that you've been there. Even though Justin was only there for a few of those years, you've always seemed to have had a very good relationship at that core kind of leadership of the company.
I've been very lucky. Yeah, I've had fantastic support from Patrick Harrison, the executive director, and Caroline Thompson before, and Grace Chan as well as CEO. Because I am, you know, I'm very collaborative person, and I need other people's opinions, and I need other people to do what my parents did. I need to come into a room and say, this is the idea, and I need them to make holes on every single thing. So that I have to myself convince myself of why is it that we should do this. And in doing so, I either find out that we shouldn't do it, or I find out the way in which we're going to tell the story of why we're doing it, and therefore reach audiences that wouldn't come just because it's a ballet, but they will come because of all the reasons that have made me come to the conclusion that definitely that's the idea we should put forward.
It's that questioning role that your dad had when you were young. It's carried on into
I love having people around that I can trust, and that we can trust each other to do that to each other.
And of course, the great physical legacy of all of that is the new headquarters, which is transformative in so many ways compared to J Muse, which, as Susan said, had many fond memories for us. I can remember going to see class there and realizing what a terribly impractical building it was for working in. So tell us about the new building and how it came about, and you know what your role was, because it is something that's going to be there forever and will change. You know, the fortunes of the company, has changed the fortunes of the company already.
It has saved the company. Without it, we would have not survived the pandemic, that's for sure. But I think it came actually from conversations with Justin about the fact that a lot of the things we couldn't achieve as a company were because we didn't have the space to do so. And that the building was becoming our biggest problem. And so he, being the man of action that he was, he went out there and started having meetings with developers all over town. And there was kind of one thing we definitely wanted, and is that wherever we moved to, we had to have an impact in our local communities. Because in Kensington, we couldn't really, people in Kensington tend to be okay. But so we were looking for somewhere where building a building was not going to be something against the community, but it was going to be something for the community. And the second part is that it had to be translucent. It had to be open for people to watch ballet, even if they didn't dare to cross the door. And we were very lucky. Ballymore was developing City Island. And we went into a meeting, Justin and I, and they offered us a certain amount of space, and we came out with triple what they offered us. I don't know how it happened. It was like a dream, honestly. We started talking, and we came out, and we looked at each other, and we did it. And then we had to fundraise. But it was also a building that was going to do a lot of things. So obviously, first, it was 6 studios the size of the Coliseum stage. But also I was very determined that we should have our own production studio. Because one of the things I struggle the most is with the fact that when anybody goes to see a musical, those musicals have been on the stage rehearsing for 6 months behind closed doors before the opening night. And a world premiere of ballet maybe has a day and a half, 2 days, 3 days. It's insane to expect us to achieve the same level of technical and lights and sets, but we should, because we're charging the same amount of money, and the audience today gets to see all the other things. So that was the idea behind creating our own venue inside our rehearsal building. It only has 200 seats, so it's not a theater, but it is the place where we get to do all of the aspects of our production 2-3 weeks before we do the premiere, and we invite audiences from our local community so they can also contribute and tell us what works and what doesn't, just like a commercial production would do. We also can do all the things, the outreach programs that we were so limited in numbers that we could accept in terms of adult classes, dance for Parkinson's, youth company, all the other things, because now we have the space. We also have an amazing health center for the dancers, including a rehab swimming pool, with currents that they can swim against if they cannot walk yet. So it was kind of the thing that unlocked all the potential of the organization, as well as the financial potential, because as you know, we have 300 theaters just here in the West End. Closing a theater is about £50,000 a week. They can instead come and rehearse at City Island. And one of the ideas about that is that then we could become the Bauhaus of the arts, where people from musicals or from the National Theatre or from film or from all the dance companies or opera will come to rehearse in our headquarters, and there will be that mixture of artists at the lobby. And that is happening, so that people like Estina, our choreographer, resident choreographer, now knows individuals from all the other performing arts. So it was a huge dream, and it happily became true just in time, just before the pandemic.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
I think we can hear in the passion of what you've just said, what I wanted to move on to next, which is your role as an outspoken leader in the arts generally, not just in dance, but in the arts. And over the last few years, we turn on the Today program or, Front Desk or, Newsnight or something, and we can hear Tamara Rojo talking about the need to support the arts, with the passion that you've just you've just shown there. And I just wonder why you've taken that role, or has it been thrust upon you? I mean, for example, the government, I know, put you on the culture recovery group. I mean, it's a big role, considering you're also running a company and you're still dancing, etc.
I mean, I think there's a mixture of things. One, I got involved. I was involved first by I was asked to be part of the board of Dance UK, that then became One Dance UK, then also the Creative Industries Federation. I've always been interested, I think, because I have seen the different models and the impact it has. So one of the questions that I've been asked often in Spain is, why is there no ballet companies in Spain? And the reason is because of the meddling of Spanish politicians, because we don't have an arts council and an arm's length project. And I think my passion and the way I started to become involved was when the Conservative government, I think it was 12 years ago, came in David Cameron government. And then I met George Osborne, and he, like most conservative, felt that public funding for the arts was not justified, and that good art should be successful enough by itself, that we should follow the American model. And by then I had studied the different models, because I had been invited by the Spanish government, which then never happen, to create a ballet company. And so I wanted to make the case for an arts council before I even took the position of making a ballet company, because I felt that there was no point on starting a project if 3 years later a change of government was going to put it down. So for me, it was most important that the Spanish government created an arts council and the arm's length project. So because I've studied the impact of that in the UK, the difference in Germany, Spain, and France when it's direct appointment by government, Canada's model, which is very similar to the UK, and then the American system, I was able to talk to George Osborne about the benefits of the system, which I still believe is the best system in the world, which is the UK one, which is there's enough funding for organizations to be able to take risk on the artists that are not known before they are popular, before they are successful, that cannot happen very often in the States, because if you ask someone for money, they want to have certain guarantees, especially if you are a corporate. You know, if a company like BP is going to put money, they're not going to do it to someone that has no career behind them. The amazing thing is when you look at the success story of the performing arts in the UK, it is because there is seed money at the very beginning of the journey of the artist, and enough opportunities for those artists to make mistakes, to learn their craft, to go out there in the road before they get this next opportunity and the next opportunity. And that is thanks to those two things, public funding and arm's length concept. And that, to be fair to him, George Osborne did change his mind, and he was one of the most biggest supporters of the arts. The one aspect of the budget that never got cut was the cultural budget. And so, you know, I think slowly that reputation kept going. And in all honesty, nobody else seemed to want to. I mean, I reached out during the pandemic, especially because I was pregnant, so it wasn't easy to be in those programs. And I reached out during the pandemic to other art leaders, and Nick Heiner came forward, Sam Mendes came forward, the director of the, I'm not going to remember now, but there were a few directors that came forward, but no one else in the dance world came forward.
I mean, we're in a stage of political turmoil right now. I mean, even today, we've had a new mini budget from Jeremy Hunt, and all the government departments are being asked to cut back. Do you fear for the future as a result of that?
I've never feared more than I fear right now for the arts in the UK. I mean, who knows, but it's not just about the money, which of course is going to make things very difficult, and the arts are always at the edge, so any cuts are painful. And if we're honest, funding has been standstill for 10, 12 years. So actually, when you look at the inflation over the last 12 years, what it's been is really that funding has been cut for 12 years for our artistic organizations. That's the truth already. I think it's inevitable there are going to be further cuts, but I think what I'm worried the most is about the Arts Council role and the view of many of the current government about the need for that, and their preferred model, which is direct funding, which museums have. And we've seen how interventionist some of the messaging towards museums has been about what kind of exhibitions they can put on if they want funding. We don't want to get to that point where the political powers are telling organizations what they can program and what they cannot.
Yeah, that's the worry. Of course, I mean, you've always been very courageous about being happy to put your head above the parapet.
Too happy.
But of course, once you do that, you're there to be shot at. And
so often.
Unfortunately, you have had moments of being shot at,
yes,
including recently with the Spectator piece, which you responded to very well, about future funding of ENB. I mean, do you think that puts off people from doing the kind of job that you do, particularly women? Do you think it's a problem for women to put themselves in that position?
I think it puts off all kinds of people. I mean, like I said, I've had conversations with other great names in the ballet or dance, contemporary dance world. Nobody wanted to come forward to lobby the government during the pandemic. And I understand, because there's a section of the press, which I'm not going to miss, of the British press, that can be very aggressive. And the worst thing is I'm a European immigrant. So I was not, like, again, who was I to talk about these things? You know, it wasn't my natural role. It's just that I could not talk about it if nobody else was talking about it.
And even to the point of talking about your own personal relationship, which, you know, wouldn't happen, I think, if it was a male director. I mean,
we know it wouldn't happen. We know that relationships in the art form are inevitable, because we live 24 hours a day in that. Like, it's very difficult to meet people outside, especially if you're a touring company. And there are other examples of people that have long relationships with dancers of the companies, and that's fine. But, you know, like, I think it's very difficult for a paper of a certain area to say she shouldn't speak because she's a Spanish European. And she's lucky enough we've tolerated her for this long. But you know, but it's very much easier to then dismantle me about this old woman who is dating a young man. You know, that seems much juicier.
Well, let's put the negative press where it deserves to be in the bin, and let's just talk about the positives, because we started off talking about Akram's Giselle, and of course the repertoire that you've introduced to the MB over the last 10 years has been incredibly expansive. I mean, bringing Akram to make Dust, Giselle, and Creature, bringing Forsyth, you know, fantastic works, but also encouraging new young women choreographers. I'm thinking about Stina, I'm thinking about Ariel Smith, for example. But at the same time, not denying the classical repertoire, which the ENB's legacy has been built on. I mean, tell us about how you came to decide on Akram, for example.
Oh, well, I was a fan of Akram as a audience member. I loved his shows. Desh for me was a masterpiece. I mean, I'm still dreaming about that piece. And so I knew I wanted him to work for us. And I had met Farouk in one of the leadership programs that I had been doing when I was trying to become artistic director. So I knew Farouk already. So I contacted Farouk to see if Akram would be interested. And at the time, he had been working with Sylvie. So he knew he could work with classical dancers, but he had not worked with any ballet companies before. And at the beginning, Akram said, no, I'm too busy, I'm not interested. And then he said, well, I'll do a duet for you and somebody else. And then he came and he looked at the company. And then he said, well, I'll do a 15-minute piece. And then ended up being a 22-minute piece, which was Dust. And then after that is, you know, it progressed into Giselle. But it was just out of admiration. I guess I wanted to bring to the company everybody I wish I had the opportunity to work with, and give the dancers as wide as an experience as possible during the years they were professional dancers.
I think when people look back on the first 20 years of this century and think what are the works that have really developed and emphasized ballet and helped to keep it alive. Obviously, some names will be there for sure. Wayne McGregor, Wielden, Crystal Pipe, but I'm quite certain that Akram's work for EMB will be right up there amongst it. And Giselle will be seen, I think, as one of the great works of the first 20 years of this century.
Thank you.
Women choreographers. So it's been a thing for you, hasn't it, to make sure you're promoting women choreographers?
Yes. You know, like I said before, I just never got to work with a woman in a creation.
That's incredible, isn't it?
I did a choreographic workshop at the Royal House with Kathy Marston. Thank you. With Kathy Marston. But we never did a piece on the stage in EMB, in Scottish Ballet, in Madrid, anywhere. And there were some moments with some choreographies by men that I just felt that perhaps if a woman had done it, it would be different. The way that the physicality of the female body, I felt there was so much emphasis in the hyperextension, and there were certain things that, you know, as I was aging, I just felt a little bit uncomfortable. I felt a bit like, do I really need to show that my hamstrings are long? Like, I don't know that that's the most interesting part of me. So I just wanted to find somebody that will tell stories about women, or that will, even in the steps, choose perhaps a different way of celebrating the female body. And I also thought, you know, we're 50% of the world. We should be at least 30%. If we don't get to 50, but at least 30% of the people
moving in
make
the
the
right
work.
direction.
Yeah.
And of course, on Friday evening, as well as it being your last performance, it was also Stina Quagwer's last performance. And somebody said to me on Facebook, where is she going? And I said, to choreography.
Exactly.
And the fact that, you know, she's able to retire as a dancer at a young age because she has a future as a professional choreographer, it's due to her own talent, but it's also due to your support. And I think the same is obviously true of Ariel and of others. So I think we should congratulate you for that. But we should also mention that there's another female choreographer coming along, and that is Tamara Rojo. And your dad said to me on Friday night, I always thought Tamara should be a choreographer, but she took too long to go there. So Raimonda was the first one.
Yes.
And then, of course, you made a Cinderella for Royal Swedish Ballet.
Yes.
Why did you decide after 10 years, nearly 10 years, suddenly you were going to make Raimonda?
I think because I wanted somebody to take on Raimonda. And in the process of researching Raimonda and thinking about the ways that it could be reframed, and the ways that many of the issues with the narrative could be reshaped, and the ways that what narrative would, it became too formed. You know, it just became a fully finished vision. And then it was kind of too late to go and ask a choreographer, will you do this ballet for me? it was a finished product as a concept. And that's not how choreographers work. And so somebody in the company said, well, you do it then. Like it's very clear that you know what you want to do. And I had never choreographed, other than a choreographic workshop as well. That shouldn't be remembered. I had never choreographed really, but I knew that a lot of it was going to be petit pas. So I thought, well, if you're going to start, you might as well borrow from the best. And so that's how I took it on as an exercise to try and find a solution to many of the problems some of our classical repertoire has. And so that was my contribution towards finding a solution to many of the questions we're asking ourselves about our legacy.
And then it led to the invitation from Nicola to go to Stockholm to make a Cinderella. That
was a huge surprise. And actually it was the other way around. So he contacted me. Once I decided I was going to do Raimonda, he contacted me to say, I need a female choreographer to do Cinderella. I know you've worked with many. Can you send me stuff? So I sent him a list of about 12. And then he came back and said, no, they're all very contemporary based and I need classical language for the company. And I hear you're doing Raimonda. And I was like, Nicola, I've never done anything. And Raimonda is petit pas, you know, Cinderella is a blank canvas. Like there's nothing to hold on to. And I said, I don't know. And he's like, well, come here, you do Cinderella, you learn how to choreograph, and then you go to EMB and you do Raimonda.
That's very generous of him.
Very generous of him. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yes, I trust you. I know you're really hardworking. I know you will be prepared. I know. And then the pandemic swept it. So I ended up doing Raimonda first and Cinderella after.
Now, there's a lovely story. We're talking about Nicola Lariche, by the way. There's a lovely story about you and Nicola going all the way back to when you were in Spain and the cassette recorder. Do you want to?
So I think I was 16 years old and it was a Sunday. And Victor said that there was 2 étoiles coming from Paris Opera because Victor was choreographing a duet for the female étoile. And she was bringing a dancer. He said, she's bringing a partner. I don't know him, whatever, young guy. And I was like, okay. And he was like, come to the studio and help us with the music. And, you know, I was like, yeah, fine. So it was Sunday and I go there, we do ballet class and this amazingly handsome man is there doing class. I think Nicola was 19. He was gorgeous. And so I got to sit for 6 hours doing play and stop, watching him while Victor choreographed. And at the end of the day, Victor said, so why did you think about her? She was a huge étoile. And I was like, yeah, she's fine. But what about him? And actually, funny enough, like 2 years later, he was made étoile. But he was glorious.
Well, and it all came full circle when he asked you to go and make Cinderella. We'll wind up in a few minutes and get to questions, but we should mention motherhood.
Okay.
Because the pandemic had a lot of kind of silver linings, and one was you were able to sort of quite secretly, really, become pregnant and become a mum. How has being a mum affected your performance? I mean, it must give you something additional, I guess.
I don't know.
No?
I think it's made it really hard. I mean, getting back into some kind of shape. I don't think I will ever get back to pre-pregnancy shape, also because of my age. But you know, finding the motivation, like for me to be able to dance now, it's not enough to do class. I have to be in the gym and do fitness, and I have to do Pilates, and I have to do strength and conditioning, and I have to do stamina work, and an exercise, and it's a 12-hour thing. And I've always missing him. I'm always, really, like, this is how you want to spend your day, lifting weights, there's a point where that motivation is not there. So if anything, he has liberated me in that I don't feel any regrets at all about stopping.
It makes the decision easier.
So easy. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking on Friday night, you're dancing a very emotional ballet, very emotional part of it. Susan and I were both crying with your partner, and there in the wings is your son. That must have such an emotional resonance at the time, I'm sure.
It's beautiful. It is a beautiful thing. Again, I'm incredibly lucky that we were able to have a child, because as I said, I'm not a young person anymore, and so it was very, very, very lucky, and I'm really fortunate. So it's just something that I've wanted for a long time.
I said that before I finished, I'd touch on a couple of the unusual facets of your life. And we used to have a pop group here in the UK on America called the 3 Degrees. I don't think many of you will know that Tamara actually has 3 degrees, including a PhD. And the end product of that was this book, which I'm very proud to have a copy of. And I have to read it because my Spanish is not very good. Perfil psicológico de un bailarín de alto nivel. Fabi, you'll have to tell me if I pronounce that right, which I think is kind of psychological profile of a elite ballerina, yeah?
Elite dancer.
Elite dancer.
Yeah.
And that was your thesis, and it's been published as a book.
It has been, yes.
But in Spanish.
In Spanish only, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
It's a very long thesis.
So we really should call you Dr. Rojo, shouldn't we?
No, don't do that.
Another iron to your fire. So is the academia kind of finished, or is there going to be another? I personally find it amazing that while you're running a company, dancing, you're also doing a PhD.
I was finishing it, to be fair.
Okay.
I did the PhD while I was dancing for the Royal Ballet.
Oh, okay.
But then the rules change, and I had to present it within 6 years of the degree finishing. Otherwise, I will lose that. So I had to kind of finish it quickly in my first year as artistic director of EMB. But all the work I had done while I was a dancer.
And to move on to my final point, I just need to reflect a little bit on injuries, because like every dancer, you've had your fair share, including dancing with a burst appendix, which, it can't be a very pleasant experience. But also you suffered quite a lot with infected bunions, and that led you, with your dad, who is an engineer, to develop a new product. Which went on the market 4 or 5 years ago, I think. A special product for dancers suffering with bunions, a stretcher for point shoes. So that's quite amazing, really.
Like you said, I had a very big infection, and I needed surgery, and then the shape of my foot completely changed. But it was only around my bunion. The rest of my foot was fine. And we all know how special point shoes are for a ballerina. And I had the same maker for years. And then, I tried different makers or different sizes to adjust to that change. But it just didn't work, because the rest of the foot was the same. So I needed the same shoe, but enlarged just around the bunion. And so my dad, being an engineer, he designed and created something for me. And then in my career, I just kept finding dancers that had the same problem or similar problems, and they will borrow my bunion stretcher. And eventually my dad and I said, well, let's just make it for no profit, just so that ballerinas around the world that have this problem have a solution. And that's what we did.
So just one more legacy of Tamara Rojo's career. Well, I think, look, I said it would be really hard to get through this whole career in an hour. We've just about managed it, Susan. So if you want to throw it open to questions now. Shall I do it? Yeah, okay, I'll repeat the question. So hang on, we've got quite a few hands up. Let's take this lady in white here first, and then this gentleman.
Your career. Looking at your choreographic career now, and seeing the way things are going, are you interested in making new ballets about the relationships of women to women?
Did you all hear that? Are you interested in making new ballets?
Gay ballets, and just listening to you, these are whole new opportunities. Is that in your experience?
Not at the moment. It's not a bad idea. I will say, I think the fascinating thing is the relationship of women to women is such a big concept because, you know, it's motherhood and it's friendship and it's sisterhood. It's not just sexual or gay relationship. I think it's a fascinating concept. I wouldn't know where to begin.
It is a great concept, and I'm sure there's plenty of people looking at that. This gentleman was next.
Ask a ballet question. Before I do, I want to say that my expertise is not in ballet, but in politics. And you can get different dancers for different roles, but I can't see anyone who can take Tamara's role in arts policy, politics, and she's going to be a huge loss there.
Well, I think we all agree with that. I'm sure. Let's hope there's some others that will step forward.
Question.
Can you repeat the comment?
Oh, sorry, I thought the voice was loud enough for everybody to hear. The comment was that the gentleman said that he couldn't see anybody able to take the role that Tamara has had over the last few years as a leader in arts policy. And then there's a question to follow.
Gavin Sutherland will no longer be director of music at the end of the year, and I wondered what his contribution to your work has been and his contribution to ENB.
So the question is, what has Gavin Sutherland, the music director at ENB's contribution been to Tamara's work and to the company?
It's been huge. His contribution has been enormous. I think, obviously, a work like Akram's Giselle, he rescued that work. I mean, 6 weeks before the premiere, the original composer pulled out. And in 6 weeks, Vincenzo Lamagna was composing during the night. So Akram was choreographing to rhythm. Then he will send the file of the rhythm to Vincenzo. Vincenzo will compose the music during the night, send it back in the morning. So we had actual tunes to work with. And at the same time, Gavin would start the orchestration of that composition, which was a computer file. And I don't really know any other dance director, conductor that is such a music genius. I think that ballet conductors tend to be underestimated, and Gavin Sutherland is the most underestimated of the lot because he is genuinely somebody extraordinary. And the same thing happened with Raimonda. You know, he put all of the changes I wanted to do in the narrative into a cohesive music score. And he's somebody that can remember any tune and develop it into a full orchestra. Some things we linked together because I did a lot of the Raimonda original score is little songs, you know, a solo, another solo, another solo. And I didn't like that. I wanted a full continuous sound. And so we sat in a room and he will play a solo, the end of a solo and the beginning of another solo, and I will sing the link. And then he will write it down and that will become a composition. And so he composed bits. And like I said, he's an extraordinary musician. He's going to Munich, I believe. And yeah, I will of course miss him very much. And I think EMB dancers have been very lucky as well.
I think and I hope that he'll be traveling around to guest with,
I'm
with
sure
other
he will.
companies. And can I just add that he's the most humble guy going. I mean, he's a remarkable music director, but he does it with a lot of humility. I've got some questions here on from those on Zoom, and apologies because I realize that it's hard for the people on Zoom to hear the questions, so I will try to make sure that I repeat them. I've got one here. It says, can you ask Tamara about her work with William Forsythe on Playlist, and does she think it brought in new audiences because of the music and choreography? By the way, I thought it was fantastic to see it Sadler's Wells earlier this year.
Yes, I mean, I've always been a huge fan of Billy's work. I've never danced his work as a dancer, but he was, one of the first choreographers I went to visit as an artistic director to try and convince him to create. He came to see us perform in Paris when Benjamin Millepied invited us to perform at the Paris Garnier, and we were doing Corsaire. And he saw the company then, and that's when he said, yes, I'll come and work for your dancers. And, he's a very busy man. So at the beginning, it was only Playlist 1 and 2. And then he completed that in Boston. But I think he's one of the people doing more to open the art form to new audiences and to demystify a lot of the art form from the most knowledgeable and excellent of positions. He really is able to present ballet to new audiences.
Absolutely. And of course, you have a chance to see his work in the Triple Bill that's coming up very soon. Yeah. Another question from the audience. Yes, the gentleman there.
Super fan Tamara. And Tamara just mentioned that you want ballet to change people's life, and you did change my life. Because your ballet was the first ever ballet I watched, and that's how I fell in love with ballet. My question is, will we have the access to see you in the future in whatever forms, like either in documentaries like you did in Swan Lake or Giselle, or maybe like the online teaching videos you did on EMB actors?
Okay, so the statement was you're living proof of ballet changing a life because Tamara changed yours. But the question was, will we get to see Tamara, if not on stage performing, and I think we've had a resolute answer to that one, in documentaries or in teaching or in some other form like that?
I don't know is the answer to that. I don't know. I'm at the beginning of a new job, a new chapter. I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot to learn. It's a different company, different traditions, different culture. So I feel like I need some time to gather my ideas and gather a little bit of, my sense of being in that new place before I can start sharing again.
The other questions on Zoom, I have to say, are all variations on a theme of people wanting to see you dance. So I'm not gonna put those to you, but it does show how much desire there is out there. But any more questions from the audience? Yes. I'm going to come up and give you the microphone because I can't hear you very well myself. No, it's okay. I'm going to be a roving mic. Can you just pass that back?
I feel very official now. I just wanted to say, firstly, as a choreography student, that your whole ethos on arts and especially dance has really kind of inspired me and molded my views on art and especially in dance. I remember in an interview before you said that you kind of felt fulfilled in all the roles that you've done before. Is there any role or choreographer or piece that you've always had like just an itching to be a part of? And conversely, is there any role that you've done that just did not click, that you didn't really like, for any reason in particular? You don't need to name names or anything.
Thank you. Great question.
Yes. So the first part of the question is there any roles that
you didn't click?
So that's the second part.
Oh, sorry.
The first part is wanted and I didn't get to do. Yes, I did want to do Lady of Camellias by John Neumeier. And I got to do the black pas de deux, which I loved. but I never got to do the full ballet. And I've tried for many years to bring that ballet to EMB, but it hasn't been possible in the last 10 years. So I would say that's one that has remained unfulfilled. There's been plenty that I felt really bad. And some that I felt really bad at the beginning, and then it clicked, like on Deane. I really didn't get on Deane the first time around. I'm sorry. I really didn't get it. I was like, what are we doing? I don't understand this ballet. And then I don't know what happened the second time around. You know, I watched it again and again. That we had an amazing room at the Royal Ballet where all of the archive was there, so we could see all the performances. So I just sat and watched Margot again and again and again, and something did click. And there was something about the naivety of the role. And also Norman Rosenthal, he's a great friend of mine. And Undine was the ballet that transformed him into a ballet fan. He loved opera, but he didn't like ballet. And then he went to see us Undine because of the score, and he fell in love with the ballet. So I felt like I had to find, you know, the key to this role. And it's one of my favorite roles now. I loved doing it, but it took a while. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's just have one more question before I wrap up. Yes. Oh, we've got two. I'll take these two. So that lady first, and then this lady next. Did you all hear that? The questioner said you've been a rebel ballerina, a rebel arts leader. What boundaries are you looking to cross in the future? I'm going to come on and talk about the future actually in a minute.
Whichever come my way. I think that's my problem. I don't like barriers. If somebody says to me, maybe I'm very much a Spaniard, you know, like a bull. If somebody says to me, you should not go that way, that's the way I'm going to go. So I don't know. At least I'm going to ask why. So I don't know. I'm sure I'll find plenty of new barriers in my new job. But yes, I enjoy the process.
And there was one other question here. Yes.
Maybe a little bit on from that. The highlight of my year is Emerging Dancer every year. I wonder if you could say a little bit about your undoubted role in bringing forward and encouraging the young dancers.
The questioner said one of her highlights of the year is the Emerging Dancer competition, and she just wanted Tamara to elaborate on.
Yes, it's one of the highlights of my year too. I think it's a wonderful occasion. You know, is I think one of the more difficult parts of a dancer's career and the more fragile is that beginning, when you are, you know, in the corps de ballet and you have to be there because you have to learn the skills and you have to learn your trade and you have to respect why, you know, there is a hierarchy and how you get into being a principal dancer, how you respect then, once you're a principal dancer, how you respect the corps de ballet that support you behind. That journey has to happen, but it's difficult. It's a difficult journey. And one way of kind of helping that process was Emerging Dancer, the concept of giving one night a year the limelight to those dancers that don't get to do so many soloist roles, but that they have shown at different times during the season that they have the potential to be a soloist, they have the potential to be a principal, that they've been generous to their colleagues, that they've been hardworking, that they've delivered, that they've taken chances when chances came their way. And it was a way of then pointing the camera now, but before the lights, onto those dancers, but then also helping the dancers on the other side of the spectrum when they are looking into becoming mentors and rehearsal directors, and start coaching the younger generation and learning those skills as well. And then also choreographers within the company to choreograph for their colleagues. And there was one of the concept of EMB that I am very much taking to San Francisco, that we should take care of the dancers from cradle to grave. From the moment they enter into our organization to the moment they leave, they should be constantly feeling supported and feeling what is the alternative, how can I progress, never stuck and never abandoned. And so emerging dancer is, like I said, the most beautiful part of that, but there's all other parts, and all of that is a concept that I am very much bringing to San Francisco.
Thank you. I have to say, I was a judge once in the emerging dancer, and it's the most horrendous job to choose between these 6 wonderful dancers. I was a judge of the year we copped out, actually, and we gave two winners. Okay, I said I'd finish off by wrapping up, and we haven't talked about the future very much. So I just thought we'd finish by talking about your new job in San Francisco. You've got 6 weeks left at ENB, I think, and 1st of December, new job, San Francisco, the other side of the world, really. How different will it be taking over San Francisco now than it was for you taking over ENB in 2012? What are the challenges that are different?
I think there's lots of differences. I think hopefully the first difference is that I am experienced now. And so hopefully I won't make as many mistakes as I probably made at the beginning in ENB. But the main difference actually is that I knew English National Ballet very well when I took on as artistic director. I don't know San Francisco Ballet so well. I've been a fan of San Francisco Ballet, but I haven't really known the company as I knew English National Ballet and understood. I knew Britain very well. I knew, like you say, the cultural landscape and the structures and the things that made it possible for a touring company and the things that made it necessary for a touring company to exist and why it had come and the history. I don't know any of that. So I do have a lot of work to do in learning. I'm very lucky because Helgi Thomasson has been very, very generous and very open. He's been there for 37 years, so he knows it all. But it's a very different environment, a very different funding model. It has its own challenges. Unions are very different in America than they are in the UK. So there's a lot to learn.
And you found a place to live, even temporarily at the moment?
Yes. We're renting a place. We see the sea.
And the very final question, which I'm sure everybody wants to ask, is once you've gone to San Francisco, will we ever see you back here?
I'm sure, yes. No, I very much, thank you. Yes. No, I very much hope to bring San Francisco Ballet to London. They've been before. So I very much hope to be able to bring the company back to London. But also I will come because, I'm an addict of the West End. I'm an addict of the theatre and the music and the arts and the dance that happens in London. So I'm definitely going to be doing field trips.
Fantastic. We all want to hear that. Well, let's give Tamara a round of very well-deserved applause.
I have to say that was a terrific round of applause, but on Friday night, there was a certain young man, about 18 months old, who clapped his heart out for his mummy. And it was just the most exquisite thing to see. Thank you, Tamara. We have been so lucky to have you here as long as we have, and we're going to miss you. The London Ballet Circle is so appreciative of all you've done, not just for us, but for the ballet world in general. And yellow is the color of friendship. So please accept these from us. And also, one other thing, Tamara has very kindly agreed to become the London Ballet Circle's first international vice president. So we're global now. Yes. And so thank you all for being with us tonight on Zoom here in the audience. Thank you, Tamara. It's just been the most fabulous evening and a fabulous 25 years. And the next 25 years is going to be phenomenal. we will see you here and in San Francisco. Thank you so much. And thank you, Graham, as always, a brilliant.